Hi guys, Samantha from Jessima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this pendant. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to start with this part over here, this nice kind of crackle flower part, because this is the part that needs to dry first. Then we're going to move on to baking it, then we're going to work on the back and the middle, and I will show you how to create the entire thing and how to put it together. Now bear in mind this is based off of a poppy, but if you wanted to base it off of another flower and change up the colours, feel free to do that. It would look really nice in other colours. So I've got a piece of white polymer clay here, and this is Primo, and it has been rolled out to roughly 2mm thick. Basically the second setting on my pasta machine. And I just want to trim away excess because we're not going to need all of it. There we go. Now I'm going to bring over the cutter that we're going to be using because I want to make sure that this clay fits that cutter comfortably. Okay, and it fits very nicely. Alright, so I'm going to be using a silkscreen. Now we're not going to use a silkscreen right away. And I'm using this silkscreen from Burroughs, and this is the Radiant Rays one. And so you can see here how we're going to get that nice radial pattern. But before we do that, we want to work with some white acrylic paint, because the Crackle that we're going to be using, this is One Step Crackle from Deco Art. This needs to be put on top of paint generally to crackle without you rolling it through the pasta machine. So I'm just going to be using some white paint. And you can use a brush or you can use your finger. I like the uneven way your finger applies the paint, because then it can give it an extra layer of depth. So I'm just going to spread out evenly, and then I'm going to spread the paint out in streaks like this. And you can see how that does apply it in an uneven way, and that is something that I like. If you don't like it, you can make it completely smooth, completely up to you. But this is how I like to do it. So I'm just trying to apply it somewhat evenly so that we don't have large areas of paint sticking out. Okay, and I am pretty happy with that. Then you will allow that to dry for however long it takes. You can also use a hairdryer or a heat gun on the lowest setting so it doesn't kill the clay, to dry the paint. But basically once the paint is dry, then we will apply our Crackle. Okay, and there we go. So I dried it quickly with a heat gun, and the difference between allowing it to dry on its own versus a heat gun or a hairdryer is that you'll get this kind of weathered effect. I'm not sure if you can pick that up on the camera, but you kind of get these little cracks that form, and that is something that I quite like. If you don't like it, allow it to dry on its own. If you use a heat gun or a hairdryer, it will create those cracks. But if you want them, that is the way to get them. So what I'll do actually is I'll maybe just stretch it a little bit just to pronounce those cracks a little bit. Okay, I'm actually going to run this through the pasta machine on the same setting just to make sure that it's the same thickness, because that paint will have caused it to be a little thicker. There we go. And that will just exaggerate those cracks a bit. Okay, and it will give us a nice smooth surface. Right, so now bring over your silkscreen of choice, and I am going to be using this one, the Radiant Rays one. Any radial silkscreen will work for this. So by radial I mean it has a centre and goes out in a circular motion. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this, and you can see that it is not sticking well to our clay, so I might bring over a piece of paper to burnish it, because I want it to stick to the clay in such a way that's not going to be moving around. So I'm just going to burnish that. Don't burnish too hard that it gets clay in it, but burnish it enough that it's going to be stuck down onto the clay. So there we go, that's not moving around, so that's good. Okay, now I'm going to bring over our Crackle. Now this Crackle dries very quickly, So you want to have a sink of water or bowl of water ready to pop your silk screen in when you're done here. I'm going to put in a nice thick layer, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to draw it across. And now I don't want a super thin layer of Crackle, so I'm going to just draw this across again to just even it out. Okay, and I'm looking from the side to make sure that I'm happy with that, so it shouldn't be too much excess. Okay, and now I don't want to mess with it too long, so now I'll lift that up, and that has left a nice pattern, and I'm going to go pop this into my sink of water. Okay, so I've cleaned off my screen. You want to make sure that you clean it well before moving on to this step. Now I'm just going to pick this up, and it has not dried yet, but I want to see if I can show you that. There you go. Now you want to let that dry, and this is going to take about half an hour to an hour to dry completely. You should start to see cracks. I would not recommend using a heat gun to dry. I generally let this dry on its own, at least with this technique in this project, because I find the cracks end up looking better. So just put that to the side and allow that to dry. Okay, so for the next step we are going to create our black edge. So for that you're going to need a piece of souffle that has been rolled out to, I'd say about a millimeter thick, roughly a millimeter thick. This is the third setting of my pasta machine. Okay, and I'm just bringing over some plain printing paper. There we go. So I can burnish this like so. And I'm just doing this because I want a nice finish on the piece. Okay. Then I'm going to bring over the cutter that we're going to be using for our flower section. And now usually you would use the cutter and you would cut straight down like so. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to place it the wrong way around essentially. And I'm just going to gently press that. I don't want to press it too hard, because I want a very thin border. And I'm going to use my craft knife, and I am going to trim around. And notice how I'm spinning the paper more than I'm actually moving my knife, and this I find gives me a better result, because then your knife basically stays at the same angle. Oops. I mean, you do have to move your knife a little bit, but in general it will allow you to keep it straight up. Okay, then lift that up. Okay, and then I'm just going to quickly clean up these sides. Now it doesn't have to be a perfect match. You want it to be very close though. Okay, so I'm just going to remove that. That can go away. Right. Okay, and that side that we just cut, flip it over, because it needs to basically match this. So you see how we will cut out our crackle piece, and then that's going to rest on top of this one, so I want the curves all to match. So if we had it the same way where we flip this over and we cut it, if I turn this over to the same shape as that piece, it no longer really matches anymore. So you want to flip over your black piece of clay. Okay, so once you've flipped it over, I want you to bring over some sort of sandpaper texture. And I'm going to be using this texture sponge. It's an aquarium filter. And I want you to press around the edges first, and what you're going to be doing is you're actually going to be beveling them. So let me show you there. So you want to press around the edges first and then continue on into the middle of your piece. Okay, there we go. So I've beveled those edges quite nicely. And then continue pressing into the middle of the piece. And notice how I'm still working on a piece of plain printing paper. This will ensure that the back of the piece still has a nice smooth texture. just making sure that I get a nice even cover of this texture. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I have this one area here where I have a fairly large piece of scrap clay that I don't want. So I'll just nick that out and then press over again. Okay. Then bring over a piercing pin or a needle tool. What I want you to do is I want you to go over the edges and just start creating lines. Like so. So you kind of get a ribbon-like edge. Okay, and now notice how we've got a bunch of little bits of clay. The way that you can get rid of that is just grab some sort of a fan-shaped brush, and I generally do it after I've done all of the ribbons. I just use that brush and I just brush over the surface like that, and it'll get rid of all the excess. So continue around the entire piece and then just brush off the excess. Okay, and now let's hope that I can catch it. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. But there you can see the texture. So now what we want to do is we want to bring over some white paint again. And I'm just giving that a shake. Just going to pop a little bit onto my tile. And then using a very small brush, we are going to highlight the stripe pattern. So I'm just going to take a teeny bit on my brush and brush it over the stripe pattern. And then you just continue doing that the entire way around again. And by the time we've done with this, our crackle should be dry. Okay, then the last step is just go over with a piercing tool or needle tool again, and just to, if there are some areas where you might have got a little bit too much white on the piece, you can always just go over those and scrape them a little bit more, just to make those highlights just a touch better. Because sometimes you can overdo the paint, it's very easy to do that, and so just going over and fixing those little areas with the needle tool makes all the difference. Pretty happy with it. Okay, so we'll put that to the side because we can't use that anymore. And I'm going to bring over our crackle, which should basically be dry. Now before I touch anything, if I direct it, hopefully you can see it, there is crackle on the surface. Now I'm just going to touch it with my finger to make sure it's completely dry. Okay, and it does feel to be. Now just as a quick extra precaution, I'm going to be using a heat gun on its lowest setting just to quickly dry it. You can use a hairdryer as well. Okay, and that was just a quick extra precaution to make sure that it is completely dry. Okay, now I'm just going to use a piece of paper to very quickly and quite gently just rub those cracks down to make sure that they are still bonded onto the clay. Don't burnish too hard because you don't want the cracks to lose their definition. And then bring over some black paint. Okay. And we're going to highlight the cracks with that. So I'm going to put some off to the side here. Just going to use my finger to run it over the surface. Alright, and that should be enough. I'm actually going to use a wet wipe now. And that will actually disperse it quite a bit over the surface, as you can see. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of as much of that paint as I can. one go. And I'm going to bring up another new one. And I'm going to actually pat it down, because I don't want to rub too much, because then if you rub too hard you actually end up lifting up that crackle. Okay. And then you can just continue doing that until you've gotten rid of the amount of paint that you want off of the piece. So we're almost done. You want to work fairly quickly because you don't want the paint to dry on the clay. Okay, and these stubborn areas I might rub just a touch. Okay, and I'll bring over one more just to clean up the entire thing. Okay, and this will be the last time we soak up any more paint. Okay, I'm going to pick that up, put that to the side, and clean up your tile. Okay, here we're going to place that onto a piece of plain printing paper again, and we are going to burnish it. And burnish it thoroughly. And now before you burnish it, you want to make sure that it has dried, so you can just give it a quick go around with the hairdryer or heat gun just to get it to dry. And then by burnishing it, we're putting everything securely onto the clay. Okay, like so. It will also have soaked up any excess paint if there is any, but as you can see there wasn't. And I am pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to bring over my cutter, and you want to find the center, like so, and cut. And then just make sure that you get a nice clean cut, which you should. Okay. I'm just going to pop that piece out. And I'm just going to quickly run my fingers around these edges just to get rid of basically any little itty bitty bits that might be left on the edges, so that we basically nullify sanding completely. See, there's very little. Okay, I'll move this out of the way. And this you should be able to easily just pop out. Now the reason it's stuck inside the cutter was because we were working on a piece of plain printing paper. If you had the clay stuck to the ceramic tile, then it would not have stuck in the cutter. But that's fine. Okay, now the last little step is I just want to quickly make this backing black. Now we don't have to put clay on it, we can easily just create the effect with some black paint. So I'm just going to pop a little bit more down onto the tile. And I'm just going to brush that one. Now it doesn't have to be a perfect black, I just don't want it to be a bright white. And you can use a brush, but I find that I have more control when I use my finger, because I don't want it getting on the edges, and I definitely don't want it getting on the front. Now bear in mind, this back, once we're finished, we're essentially not going to be able to see it. If we look at the pendant from the side, we might be able to see a little bit of the colour, but we're not going to be able to see the details. So this is why I'm using black paint instead of black clay, because it avoids using more clay, it avoids making an extra step, and putting paint on ultimately is easier. It's not what I would recommend if you're able to see the back openly, but since we're not going to be able to see it very well, this is a easy way to just get it to a darker finish. And there we go, that's pretty much fine. Okay. Then just quickly scoop up those little excess bits. And there we go. Now just quickly allow that paint to dry, like so. Then bring over a fairly large dish. I want a very shallow dome on this. And I just got this from the dollar store. And just press that down so that it is sitting in the middle and so that it has that little dome to it. And then I would bake that for, I'd say roughly about 40 to 30 minutes at pretty much recommended temperature. And then once that is baked, we are going to add it onto our black backing that we have here. So bake that and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, and here it is out of the oven. So you can see that the contrast has deepened quite a bit since it was in the oven. The crackle has darkened, and yeah, the lines are now a lot more visible. So now the next step before we actually attach it to our black piece that we made earlier is just to create the just the red highlights around both edges. And so you're going to want some black paint. Give it a good shake. I just need a small amount of that. Very small brush again. You want a very small amount on the brush, and actually we're going to paint the edges first. This red shade. Oops, I'm doing that off camera, sorry about that. We're going to paint the edges a red shade. Like so. And then once we've painted those edges a nice light red, then we can move on to the inside part. And also paint these edges along the side here red as well. Okay, and there we go. So now what you want to do is you want to just very lightly create a red rim. Now the trick to this is to take a very small amount on your brush and have it almost dry, and then brush it over the surface like so. So you want a tiny amount of paint when you're doing this. And you'll do that on the inside part as well. There we go. So that should basically be dry by the time you're finished, essentially, because we're using so little paint. And so now the next step is going to be to place it onto here. So first thing is to grab a little bit of translucent liquid clay. And I'm just going to dab just a bit along the outside. And this way it will stick. And you might as well cover the whole piece in a gentle layer of liquid clay, and that way you'll actually seal in the paint that you had on earlier. There we go. Now you want to find the matching spot so that the pieces line up correctly, as you can see, and then press down firmly in the middle of the piece so you get it to press into that clay like so. And there we go. Now the next step is going to be to create the little bits in the middle over here. So you're going to want white, black and red souffle. So the souffle colour that I'm using is cherry pie. Just bring up some of that. I also am going to be using some black and some white. So just bringing over all of those. There we go. Okay, I'm going to put this to the side because I don't need to work with that right at this moment. And I'm just going to bring over a piece of paper so that I can put the little balls on there. And I will start with the white, then I'll go to red, then to black. Okay. And you want to make a whole bunch of little balls, like so. And I will do that with all the colours that I have. They don't have to be exactly the same size, you want them roughly the same size. And you want them roughly round. Then when we're done with that, I will show you how to apply them to the piece. Okay, so I've got them all rolled out here. And I'm going to bring over my piece and put it here so you can see what we are doing. And then I would recommend getting a ball tool. Let me just grab one that I think is a nice size. Here we go. And we are going to start with red. So you're going to pick that up with your ball tool, like so. And you're going to place that down, like so. Pick up another one. And place it down. And each time you place it down, just make sure that you get a nice deep hole. Like so. And then just continue doing it the entire way around. And then the next ring will be white. Okay, and there we go. So then the next step will be to move on to the white. And you'll basically repeat the same process as you had before, where you will take it with your ball tool and press it into place. And then you'll move on to black, do a ring of those, and then after that we will finish it off. Okay, then the next step is basically to take two of your little balls, roll it up into one, pop that in there, and I'm going to bring over a bigger ball tool. I'm going to squish that into place. And now I want you to take a very teeny tiny piece of white, roll that into a ball, take that, squish that down into the middle, like so. And now you can leave it as it is now if you want, but what I like to do now is I will take a piercing tool, and if I show you the original, you can see here they make little holes in each, so all I'll do is I'll go through and pierce each one of them, like so. Then in some of them I will do little dots, so the red ones I go around and just make these little dots, like so. Then for the white ones I'll go around and actually create a flower shape. And I will also pierce them. Then the black ones I will just go through and make a hole in each. And then for the middle one here I will create a little ring of dots like so around the outside, and then I will create a little flower. Like so. Okay, and then this piece right in the middle, the little white bit, I just make a bunch of little dots, like so. Okay, and then I will do that with all of them, and then when we're done, we're going to bake it. Okay, and now that it is out of the oven, we want to drill a hole. And so I generally do it right at the top over here. So Let me just find a good spot. Okay, there we go. And you might have to just angle it a touch. There we go, but it doesn't take too much to drill through. There we go. And just make sure to get that out of there. You don't want that sitting in there. There we go. And just drill from the other side just to make sure it's a nice clean hole. Okay. Then I'm just going to grab a jump ring, which I do have already open. Just going to take that and I am going to pop that through the loop that we've made. And I already have a Kanihima cord ready over here with a bail. I'm just going to connect the jump ring to the bail like so. And now you might be wondering why it's a little shiny over here. It's because it's a little bit of water in there. This is supposed to be completely matte. I didn't want to add any shine to it because I think the matte look looks really nice. Another way you could do it is you could also add a bail like this, where it's a little pinch bail. That also works quite well. And depending on how much crackle you apply and how much it wants to crack, and also how much paint you, how much of the black paint you wipe away, you'll end up with a different finish each time. So you can see this one is much lighter than this one, so it's completely up to you which one you like the best. But just bear that in mind when you are creating your pieces, that basically you are going to end up with slightly varying effects when it comes to this section. So that is basically it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments below. Remember, you can do this in a bunch of different colours if you want. Play around with it, have some fun. And if you have questions, also leave them in the comments below and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. And as always, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.